Good morning and welcome to Office Hours, the show where we answer your technical media production questions every single week. Courtney, what's up first?
Well, the first one comes in from the QR code. Francis Fry in Cambridge, Massachusetts asks, I am looking for a rock-solid hardware KVM for 4 single-use Macs used for a live show, for example, Zoom or a Zoom ISO and tiles. Everything I have tried is glitchy. What are your suggestions?
Guy, what do you think?
Well, if you got the money, the way to do it is the top of the line. It would be Adder Technologies. That's one of the top in the industry that you'll see in trucks and things like that. Jeff Keithley owns quite a few of these. At the show, NAB, we were looking at the new Bird Dog Play, and one of the interesting things on the Play Pro is that there's two USBs on it, and what they're using those for is a keyboard and a mouse. So you can use the NDI KVM. So the NDI is your studio monitor, is your monitor, and then you hit KVM on your remote machine, and those pop up as individual machines that you could control. So that's kind of an interesting poor man's way of doing it, because those are, well, I shouldn't say poor man's, because they're $299, and those are PoE devices. So for Francis's specific question, I would say take a look at the adder, but also ask when we have Jeff Keithley or one of the folks in chat might be able to recommend some of the other items that are a little more affordable than adder, because those are probably going to be thousands.
And Craig.
Yeah, you said not glitchy, I'm assuming. So I just wanted to reiterate, do not be swayed into using the Apple, I think it's continuity or whatnot, where you can move your cursor around to different Macs. It's just too glitchy and not for production use.
Yeah, for me, I haven't used anything super high end, but I've been using the Test Smart brand of KVMs. I have actually several products. I've got both their HDMI matrix, the 4x4. They also make an 8x8, 16x16. And I also have their 8-port KVM that I use every single day to switch between all of these different computers. They do have a video component part of that for switching, which I'm not using. I'm strictly using it for controlling mouse and keyboard across I think 6 different computers right now, and it's been working reliably. It has IP control as well. And I have managed to get it working with BitFocus Companion. There's a module there to control. It's a little, the network stack's a little finicky. They did some weird things when I set it up, but overall it's been working pretty solid for me. Guy, you had another thought?
Yeah, for Francis specifically, I like to use Splashtop to actually get into other machines, because then I can resize the windows to whatever I want, and I could move those around and minimize them and whatnot. So Splashtop would be my other recommendation as far as being able to spawn multiple windows. So day to day, I'm in Splashtop in and out on multiple machines every day. But here locally on this specific machine, I use Synergy with a combination of a failover to a cheap KVM. So I can go to any of my machines and move my mouse across all of them using Synergy. It's like $100, and it goes Mac, PC, Linux, and I can move my mouse and use one keyboard and mouse. But if something ever happens, I can push a button. My KVM has a little button that I push, and it cycles through 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I can jump over there in an emergency. I haven't had to use that button, but I have it at the ready just in case. But Splashtop is just, I can't recommend it enough. It's a wonderful tool, especially if you have 2 accounts and you have like 20 computers. It's nice to be able to be remote and be able to log into these things. So I could be in a coffee shop at 10 megabits a second, but I'm controlling my machine here that's got 10 gigabits. So I'm throwing around files like nothing and be able to upload, download, use Frame.io. All that stuff's happening at my cloud machine. So think of that as well. If you're out of your office, even sitting on your couch, you could be like, is that render done? And you just open up Splashtop and you're like, oh yeah, next step, upload to YouTube, click. And so it's really efficient when you start to get into this mindset of, hey, I could control any computer from wherever I'm at, even on an iPad. That's the other thing. I use my iPad Pro all the time to control other machines.
Hope that helps you out, Francis. You got a variety of responses there. And just remember, too, you can also jump into our Discord community and chat with people and post back and let us know how things are going. And speaking of community, if you want to be part of this show and ask questions, we got room on this show for Saturday. So if you'd like to post questions, you can do so now. You can vote on those questions up and down. It's incredibly important because you basically drive the run of show. That tells us what's important, which ones we should push to the top and give priority, as well as chat with everybody. There's lots of lively chat. People provide comments and stuff like that there and suggestions. So you're missing half the fun if you don't know where to go to do that. All you need to do is sign up and go to officehours.global/join. That's officehours.global/join. Put in your name and email, and that's how you get all the links to this show, including Discord and all the other stuff that you need to get to be part of the community. All right, Courtney, what's up next?
Next one comes in from down in Houston, Texas. Peter Belbin asks, BlackMagic and 2110. My take is that the BlackMagic design are not breaking the 2110 spec by using efficient codecs, but are other 2110 suppliers adding support for BlackMagic design codecs, or are they creating a situation of vendor lock-in by not supporting them? Walled garden
You know,
situation.
there been some internal chat about possibly doing a 2110 special. And, you know, this is something that I think we probably need some people that have a lot of knowledge on this particular topic. Courtney, what do you think?
You know, I tried it's changing right now because of their announcement right before NAB. They've got a whole slew of new 2110 equipment coming out, enable and routers and switches and things like that, and that incorporate 2110 backbones. And so their implementation is just a more efficient way of sending it around over 10 gig networks. But all of their new stuff they announced supports 100 gigabit networks. So it remains to be seen if they're going to be stuck with their more efficient codec that their early 2110 implementation was, or if they're going to go ahead and transition to the full 2110 support, including UHD transport besides the HD transport. So that remains to be seen, since none of that hardware has escaped yet. So it remains to be seen whether they're going to create a little walled garden over their first implementation of 2110, or if they're going to go ahead and expand it out. 2110, you know, their current stuff is a subset of 2110. It's not unique. It's allowed under the spec, and since that spec is variable, you know, it's a moving target, and how much other hardware manufacturers support each individual flavor of 2110 is really up to the individual hardware manufacturer, and how much they want to parse that incoming stream and deal with the various formats that different manufacturers will be using.
And Guy.
Yeah, it's an interesting time in this transition as people like me are trying to figure out this whole 2110 from SDI, from HDMI, from our cameras that we want to continue to use and will use and make money off of, because it's going to be an expensive transition to go full 2110. And Blackmagic's trying to make it affordable. When I was researching some switches to try and figure out everything, and I was talking to Jonas, and he's like, yeah, you're going to need a PTP clock, and the Grandmaster is going to be like $2,000, and you know, that's just the baby one. And so there's all these so I have a Netgear M4250, and when I asked ChatGPT, what do I need it, will my 4250 work, and it's like, well, it has PTP, but you're going to need a 4350. And so all of a sudden it's like, if you want to play in this other world with like Matrox and some of the traditional 2110, you got to get into the Aristas and some of these other switches, Cisco, that, you know, you got to be a super propeller head. So as I talked with Blackmagic at the show, I was like, you guys need to put up some tutorials. You need to put some kind of training wheels on this and let people see the transition. So point to point's pretty easy to figure out. The device that they released like 2 years ago, there's a video by our friend Brandon over on Live Streaming Mastery where he just does 3 SDIs to 2110, and then it's just the same device on each side. So that part's easy. But when you get crazy, this is the Blackmagic booth, is when you start talking about the NMOS nodes, the PTP, is it locked? So here's this new backend that they were showing on the show floor, which shows the NMOS registry, video hubs, I think this app is called Discovery. Let me see what the name at the top says. Blackmagic Discovery. And you can see it's just running inside of a web browser, but you could see like this is a, what device is this? S to H. So this is probably an SDI to HDMI. Actually, what is that one? S to H. I'm not sure, but here's like an IP converter, 12G PTP is locked, NMOS is a node, and then you could click on admin and it spawns open another window, another tab. So this is just Firefox. And then from there, you can see if you want to enter in manual or automatic. And that's the beauty of this system is everything that they had was on automatic, and it was just talking to each other and figuring things out. So we do want to get BlackMagic on, or somebody who's super knowledgeable that has this stuff. And I think we can get them on our show and give us some of the baby steps to start to take. And then some of the experts they were just blowing my mind in the booth as I was asking questions. I was just like, oh my gosh, I got to get new hyperdecks because you could do 8 streams over 1 cable, and it's really clean on the back when you walk around to the back. I'm used to like all this massive cables, but you don't need 8 cables now. You could just use one 100 gig cable. So, and those are just DAC cables. They're just SFP 100 QSFP, and one can hold a lot of data, including super high frame rate, 400 frames per second. So that's why some folks in the sports industry will come early to this, because they'll just grab a 12K camera that's capable of IP direct. So now you're not using SDI because it can do that high frame rate. So when people ask, why would I want to do that? Well, are you one of those people that are doing like MMA and you want to slow down that last, choke out or whatever? Then that might be your research to be doing over the next few months, in Excel spreadsheet to figure out how much it's all going to cost.
Yeah, and there's some additional insight coming into the chat too from a couple of people. Mickey McAchore is saying BlackMagic Design is also keeping their infrastructure more complicated to integrate with by not being as open as others. It is absolutely possible, but quite a pain. And then John Wallace followed up with ST2110-20/21 uses proprietary compression instead of uncompressed video, plus proper traffic shaping and timing, violates packet delivery rules for real networks. While I appreciate you don't feel that it does, it actually does violate the spec. So it's really, really interesting. And like I said, as things evolve, we'll probably want to do a special show where we just dedicate an hour to talking about this, because it's complicated and very, very interesting. All right, let's go to the next question.
All right, next one comes in from some stranger named Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. And Alexander, you ask, why is it that lots of motion puts more stress on streaming video encoders? For example, a layout with 4 boxes, but the background is animated. How does that work behind the scenes?
Go ahead, Chris.
So it's simple compression, right? And we can distill this down to, like, let's not look at video, for example. Let's just look at a basic image. And so this image right here is a 1920 by 1080 pixel image. And when I save this image out as a JPEG with a level 6 compression, it gives me 700 kilobytes. When I save this image out, it's 16 kilobytes. Right? Like a drastic difference. And really what it is there's just more stuff. There's like, if everything's the same, the compression is real easy. We just say everything looks like this. What compression is doing is it's finding things that are similar and grouping them and saying, oh, this bit's all the same, and this bit's all the same. And so the more that's different, the bigger the file is. And so when you extrapolate that to video, you just do that 30 times per second or 60 times per second, and that just compounds and expands, and every time any pixel, and especially like when you talk about like a full moving background, like every pixel changes every second, and so that's just lots, and it can't compress that, it can't shrink that down, and so it becomes bigger, and it either becomes very processor intensive to compress that, or it can't compress that, and it just becomes a lot of bandwidth.
Right. Yeah, and I remember many times on this show when Alex Lindsay was talking about what he does to test encoders to see how good they are. He would put a video up of like, waves crashing, stuff like that, because that really stresses. Actually, that reminds me too, because I've been wanting to test the H.264 RTMP encoding inside of Mimo Live. That actually would be a good video to actually test the encoder with. Go ahead, Courtney.
It's fairly complex. That the compression for live streaming is a lot more complex. H.264 uses intraframe, which is what Chris was talking about within the frame. So anything that's moving within one frame or different areas within one frame are then compressed as to reduce the size of that iframe. But then there's P frames, which is the delta V, the difference between that iframe and subsequent frames. And so it just sends it sends the iframe with the interframe compression, and then it has to do intraframe compression, which is what's changed between that iframe and the next frame, and it only sends the data that has changed. And to do that, there's really complex algorithms in there that are motion tracking the movement of individual pixels within the frame, so that it can predict where that next frame is going to be, so it gets a kind of a jump on that calculation. So it is fairly complex. Here's what I use to test to break interframe compression. I don't know if that's going out at full frame rate now, but each of those are running at full 30 frames per second, and things are changing in each one of those 9 individual frames of first-person shooter games there. So there's a lot of pixels to track in every one of those frames, and each frame is moving in different directions. So the algorithm that is looking to predict the next frame is really thrown off because it's got to track all 9 of those frames, the directions they're going, and where the next possible position of those pixels from where they were in the previous frame to where they are in the next frame. It's a nightmare. So zoom compression can break down when you're trying to do something that complex. And something with that much movement in a lot of little different frames is different than one big frame with, let's say, waves going like Alex's test, where that one big frame, a lot of the pixels are all moving in the same direction, like the waves are coming in. So it can use that predictive stuff to save calculation of where those new pixels are going to be and where to render them and how to send them, how to compress them. So, if you have something that puts up multiple windows, don't have a moving background because that just adds to the complexity of the compression. If the background is the same, at least that's something that it doesn't have to create new macro blocks for in the next frame. So give your streaming encoder a break. Good video encoders are not real time. They're multipass, and it takes them more than a frame to calculate the next frame to do highly efficient compression.
Right.
And this is the type of compression that's done for, packaged stuff that's going to stream out and play out. The encoder takes longer than real time to encode it, although it can be decoded more quickly because it's very efficiently coded and it uses less bandwidth to transmit. And this is the kind of codecs that Netflix and all of the streaming suppliers use, since they're not trying to do it, unless they're trying to do it live. If they're not trying to do it live, their encode, they can take their time with their encode and create a very efficient package.
And I noticed that they all seem to now use H.264, and I know, well, like for when I do my show, I'm using Mimo Live, which only supports H.265. Would there be a major advantage in the encoding process to switch to something like H.265? Do you think that would be better for something that had...
H.265 is more efficient. It squeezes more data in more pixels into a smaller pipe. So I think it's about twice as efficient as 264. So you're going to save on bandwidth. So if you're paying for your bandwidth, it's important. It would give you an advantage to use less bits and less bandwidth with H.265.
All right. Well, I've just been schooled officially. All right, Courtney, what's up next?
Next one comes in from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. I'm uploading files from an old hard drives to my Dropbox. One is 500 gigabytes. I'm doing this all on a Mac Mini M2, and when I use the web browser version, it doesn't actually respond when I drag files over. However, it does respond on the desktop version. Why?
Yeah, I've experienced this on a lot of it. Web browsers and web-based file uploading services don't handle large file uploads very, very well. And I can't explain to you the technical reason for that. It might be something to do with memory and the way it compresses stuff. But You're absolutely right. As you discovered, the desktop app is going to be the most reliable way. I would never ever use a web-based tool for uploading large files. In my experience, it's never been reliable. Sometimes the upload will start, then it stalls, then sometimes the whole entire web page will crash. So it's something that I just steer clear of. All right, next question.
Next one comes in from Peter Belbin in Houston, Texas. How does Splashtop compare to RustDesk for remote access to machines?
Guy.
Yeah, I'm going to trust my peers on this one. The Jeff Keithleys of the world and the Jonases of the world all recommended Splashtop, and I jumped on it. And the reason being is that it's a paid service, and if you want stuff that is open source and you have the time to set up the servers and everything, I didn't have time. I tried putting Rust on one of my machines, and then I was like, oh, you need a server, and then I was like, all right, forget it. I'm just going to go keep paying for what I'm paying for. At the time I had Jump Desktop, and Jump Desktop has been used even by remote editors to edit feature films in Final Cut. So Jump's another one that you might want to take a look at if you're on the cheap. I've also seen folks like Omar Gadon used Google Remote Desktop while we were on the show floor to control his remote vMix station at home from his phone. I thought that was pretty funny that he was running vMix basically on his phone. But that's the type of thing that you want to be looking at, is the speed and the latency of the video. So it depends on the use case. So for me, I love feeling like it's native. And that's the important part, is I'm willing to pay the $5 to $10 a month, whatever it is. I don't do the high performance mode. I know other people pay I think it's $149 a year for the high performance mode with the 444 color. The nice thing is that the sound comes over, and you could even do things like put a Stream Deck on the other side, and you could say USB device redirection. So you can have your Stream Deck remotely and still control that machine. And it's just a joy seeing like 4 machines all open at the same time and being able to jump between them, like I was saying earlier on Francis's question. So while I can't answer specifically what the nuances of RustDesk, because I haven't seen the performance as far as side by side, it's just a pain to set up from what I figured out. And if you do want SSO and some of the more secure things, you're going to have to pay RustDesk anyway. So you may as well just go with the tried and true. But if you want to go play, go play.
Yeah, that's my experience too. I've used Parsec, and it was very, very smooth, but I really like Splashtop. But and for the price that you're paying, I think they charge for the highest performance one that's like supports 240 frames per second or something like that. It's ridiculously butter smooth for doing stuff, for anything that matters. If you're working with video and you need to play back stuff, or you need to jump on a machine and do an edit on something, I think it's worth the money for just the performance alone, and you're supporting a good product too. Next question.
Next one comes in from Rajan Chandil in Los Angeles. Has anyone ever used Linux for live productions or in production?
Linux for live productions. I'm not aware of anybody doing that, but Chris, what do you think?
I mean, it depends on what you mean by use. I use Linux in live productions all the time. All my web servers are all hosted on Linux, and I have all kinds of web tools that power our graphics engines and all kinds of stuff. So I use it that way. I use it for our tennis streaming. We have 6 tennis courts that all have each individual court has its own camera. Each court streams an SRT feed into a Linux server that uses FFmpeg to overlay a scorebug graphic and then restream that out to our streaming provider. So, I mean, do I use Linux with a program like OBS? No, but I use Linux all the time in production.
All right, there you go. And it was brought up in the chat too by John Wallace that pretty much all hardware appliances are Linux. And yeah, that's technically true. I'm not sure that's what Rajan is getting at. I have a feeling that Rajan is asking, is anyone showing up to a production and bringing a laptop running Linux? I have never seen that. But hey, there might be somebody out there that's using some specialized tools. I think the challenge too with a lot of the production tools that are both video and audio, they're really designed for either Windows or Mac OS, right? Those are the 2 big platforms and operating systems because of driver support, and they have the developer support. So it's less common, although I know BlackMagic does have a version of DaVinci Resolve on Linux. I don't know what the percentage is of the install base for that type of product. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and if you look inside any of the large animation studios like Disney or DreamWorks Animation, a lot of them are based on Linux because they have a whole lot of seats and they don't want to pay licenses to a licensed version of an operating system, and it runs very well on. They use a lot of custom software. They write a lot of custom software that runs on Linux. So you'll find a lot of big corporations that do a lot of graphics, animation, things like that. A lot of times will be Linux based in their facilities.
All right, let's go to the next one.
This one comes in from you, Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. Do vendors still need NAB? Why not build a first-class broadcast studio to stream your product announcements and take live viewer questions like we do on this show every day? Isn't that more inclusive? Certainly more affordable for vendors.
Yeah, it got me thinking about this recently because we've had a lot of discussions about the change that the National Association of Broadcasters has brought over the years, how it's become more and more accessible, and you see a lot of newer companies now that are selling, basically prosumer products in an environment that typically you would have never seen products like that. So really the whole industry has changed, and obviously some high-end technology has trickled down to more readily accessible products. And I think that's great for everything. I think that really democratizes this technology to make it more accessible for people to be able to do their own shows at a more reasonable cost. Absolutely, I think lowering that barrier is really good. But yeah, it really got me interested in talking about that because things have definitely changed, and I think that it would make it more accessible because there's just so many benefits. In terms of the cost, you're not paying for flights, you're not paying for the hotel, and you're not paying $20,000 for internet at NAB, and there's so many advantages. Let's go to Courtney first, then Guy.
Yeah, I think, there's several aspects to a live show like NAB. One is just the product announcements and the ability to actually give hands-on experience to your users where they can actually touch and feel the equipment, feel how the switches feel and the buttons and the switchers, or how smooth the knobs are, or the sliders are. Are they using Penny and Giles? Are they using cheap sliders? You can tell that by touch. You can't tell that from a video demonstration of the product. The other thing is the community and the networking for the attendees. This is something where the attendees not only get to see the products of the manufacturers, but they get to talk to other attendees. And you don't see this even in a Zoom call or where you have two-way communications between, let's say, the user and the manufacturer. You don't have the user-to-user communications usually, so that you can't, hear somebody talking to the manufacturer about something they're doing on a sports broadcast that you didn't even think of. And then you can go to that, you can kind of take that other user aside after they have their conversation with the manufacturer and ask them, pick their brain about how they're using the product, et cetera. And you don't get that kind of three-way communication that you get at a trade show where you meet other people, you sit down at lunch. I remember sitting at an AB, sitting down they have communal tables, big round tables where everybody will sit, and you go get a meal at the, rubber chicken stand and sit down and find you a seat somewhere, and you'll be sitting at a table with a bunch of exhibitors sometimes or other attendees. I sat down at a table once and I realized sitting across from me and having a conversation was Ray Dolby and his son. So I got to pick Ray Dolby's mind right there at lunch at NAB. And you don't get that one-on-one type of communication and that intercommunications between people that you may not know or may not meet or that are from all over the world. And that two-way communication or three-way communication is an important part to an in-person show. And I don't think if they all went to, every single manufacturer has a website now where they put their product releases on and they put tutorials up and announcements up where you can go to at any time of the day or night and look at those and view them at your leisure without having to involve anybody live. So live streaming is not really a necessity for product announcements. It's for that two-way communication and flow of information and questions that is important at a trade show.
Let's go to Guy.
Yeah, I think this show really does a service to the industry being able to talk about these things all year long, because if we just have a couple shows like IBC for the Europeans and we have Infocom, there is something about being able to go and not only ask your own questions, because again, like Courtney said, you never know who's on the other side of that table or who's behind you. I mean, Grant Petty was beside me a bunch of times while I was at the show, and it's wild to just think that that's the guy that was just in those videos. But now I could turn around and ask him a question or ask one of his peers a question specifically, because some of the questions I had, they had to go like 3 people deep to answer my question. It's like, okay, let me get the product manager. And then they even had to go to Australia. They're like, when somebody wakes up, I'm going to email you the answer to that, because some of the stuff that my questions were just so down the rabbit hole. So it's interesting to go and also have a meal with somebody, share your experiences of what the future is, because a lot of the stuff that people just won't talk about online, they won't go on the record and talk about it. So being able to pick people's brains and see and hear, like I talked to David Ross for quite a while with CJ at the booth, and again, that's the guy who's, the castle-sized booth on the show floor. These are the heavy hitters, and then you do things like this. Like this is me at the BlackMagic booth playing with the. If you look up here, this is the immersive. This is the new Thunderbolt 5 with an IP100 card. So this is totally beta stuff that how are you going to do this? How are you going to get this kind of thing where I can't tell you what 8K per eye looks like. I mean, I could try to describe it to you, but I'm looking through this thing that's doing all this heavy processing, fiber cable going down into 2 IP100 cards, going into a Mac Studio over Thunderbolt 5, 2 cables, and then going into this specialized software that's doing this decode so that I can watch it in real time. And even that was compressed, and they said it was massive data. They were just saying, they were trying to describe it to me, but they didn't know how many megabytes per second or gigabytes per second it is. It's crazy stuff. So and also let me just scrub through this and see, like, talking to Doug Johnson here at this point in time, he's epic. Like this guy, he's done so many videos, and being able to ask him what cameras he's using and how many he has, and other folks were able to talk to him on the show floor as well through our virtual intercom system. There was let's see, Matrox booth. There were some great questions there. And I put a lot of these videos up inside of Opus Clip inside of our Discord as I let the AI process kind of the highlights. Oh, and then there was an interesting question here from, so this is the guy who wrote Omniscope. So this is Thomas, and I've emailed this guy a bunch of times, but to meet him in person, he'll tell you things and let you see him of what's important. So he had this new 4-up method that was released at the show of displaying 4 cameras. Why you would want to do that if you had 4 cameras that you need to match. I'll be doing a show tomorrow where I have to match 4 cameras. So him showing me how to do it is, you just can't get that kind of support on. Well, I guess you could online. You could ask the question, and if somebody has screen sharing, but seeing it on a Flanders monitor by the guy who wrote the software, it's pretty amazing. So that was the Omniscope booth. Let me see if there was anything else here that you just couldn't do. Oh, we had our friend Joe DeMax. Oh, and then the telecam, I immediately saw the difference in when I hit that joystick right there on the left side, as opposed to, I run UE 150s all the time. And the deceleration on these, I was like, not for me. I mean, it's okay for some people, but I prefer the Canons and the Panasonics that cost way more money, but it's a look that you need if you're trying to slow down. Like the controller that I use, the RP150, it has a little knob on it that you could turn to feather out your moves. And so there's just certain things that you demand at the highest end, and it's the reason why Panasonic's a leader in that space. So I don't want to keep going, but you get the idea.
No, you're 100% right. And I knew this. I asked this question because I knew it would be somewhat provocative, and that was the whole point of talking about this. And I absolutely agree with everything you're saying. It's like every time somebody tells me, oh, well, nobody goes to concert, nobody cares about concerts anymore in 10 years from now, we're not going to have live concerts. Like, that's not true at all. I think there's, for the foreseeable future, because I can't say for certain, I mean, nobody can totally predict it, but I think for the foreseeable future, there's an inherent desire in human beings to collaborate and to have community and to be in person and to share experiences. And I think all of you are 100% right that this is something that we're going to want to continue. Now, obviously, for conferences in general, we've obviously seen, I mean, you can look at the industry reports, numbers have gone down. But I think for the foreseeable future, at least I think in the next probably 10 years, NAB is still going to be a viable thing. And, like I think any industry, as things evolve, as consumer habits change, we'll have to adapt and we'll have to make changes. And maybe they'll have to figure out, like, do we need to downsize it? Like, how do we make this still a valuable thing, but do it maybe on a smaller scale where it's a little bit more affordable, but still valuable for people to have. And I think there is still a place for doing live broadcasts. I think what BlackMagic is doing, to be frank, and what companies like, obviously Apple's probably the gold standard for doing these pre-recorded demos. I mean, they don't really have a live component per se because they're pre-recorded and they don't interact with the audience. But I think there's still a space for having that kind of interaction with a live audience, similar to what we do for products. I don't understand why more companies don't jump on that. But I think I definitely think it's something that I would like to see more companies do, and I feel like that makes me closer to the company. Like I feel more heard, that I'm able to actually ask questions, and and they mention my name on the show, and I'm able to interact and ask those questions, and I think that's super important. But anyways, it's a very interesting discussion. There's lots of lively chat. Too much that I can't really cover, but again, that's why you want to be part of the show. That's why you want to be part of the community. We've talked about that before. So if you don't know where to go for that, you can go to officehours.global/join. I'm just going to plug that again. I don't normally do that at the bottom of the show, but I think that's super important. All right, Courtney, what's up next?
Next question comes in from Hector Rodriguez in Springfield, Virginia. He says, I am watching the portrait format on YouTube. How is Office Hours doing this stream?
All right, go ahead, Guy.
So at the NAB conference, we had Renee Ritchie on a stage in the Creator Lab classroom, and Chad's question actually got answered by Renee in real time. And one of the things that they're doing now inside of YouTube is they'll center cut. If you say dual stream, they'll just take your horizontal and center cut, which is what you want. And so what we're doing today is different, where we have a purpose-built stream. And we had Ecamm on the show, and they had some secret sauce of being able to send up the horizontal and the vertical and have it appear as a short during the live and after appear in the shorts feed. So there's this whole discovery thing. And when I did a little more research, I had mentioned this plugin called ATEM. I don't know how you say it exactly, but it's AITUM. So Chad wrote here in our chat, says, we are currently using vMix in 1080p 60, sending NDI over to OBS. So OBS is using the ATEM plugin to compose both horizontal and vertical feeds, upsampling to 1440p 60 for the sake of the higher ladder on YouTube. Although we're using HEVC anyway, so probably won't do the upsampling next time. So that's direct from the horse's mouth. And it was so cool yesterday to see these guys in after hours sharing information and putting this together and learning and discovering and changing constant bitrate, I frames, P frames. I was watching and just in amazement to see the community sharing this knowledge and how to build it and pushing the limits. Like, who's doing this? Like, you tell me who, well, besides gamers, so in this space, there's some Twitch people that are figuring things out. So we might just be taking plays out of their playbook because they figured it out actually over a year ago. So we're actually late to the game. But to the original question, Renee Ritchie said on the stage, it's happening soon. So there was a video that I had put up before where there's a creator that was given, there's like 1% of creators were given this RTMP separate feed where they could send in and it pops up in the shorts discovery feed. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it so that after the fact, we're getting in a different area so that there's more watch time. And Ecamm's able to do it. And it was based on this plugin. So that's how we're doing it.
Awesome. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Montreal, Canada. Inchi asks, how does Splashtop compare to Parsec?
Go ahead, Chris. They're kind of different beasts. It just kind of depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Parsec is known for its low latency, like high resolution, real high quality video stuff. So like maybe if you're doing If you're doing something where you need to like critically look at the video, Parsec might be a better choice. Where Splashtop excels is its scale. It supports multi-monitor. So like I've got 4 monitors right here, I can use Splashtop to connect to a computer in the production room that's got 4 monitors, and they all show up. And so it looks just like I'm at that 4 monitor computer. Um, it's they're kind like they do the same thing, but they're kind of it's like I don't know, bananas to plantains, right? They're in the same realm, but they're really kind of aimed at different purposes. And like I said, Splashtop is more it scales better. It you can connect to multiple computers at the same time. You can do that with Parsec, but it's kind of a workaround. You have to use like the portable app and open multiple instances of the portable app to connect to multiple computers at the same time. And in Splashtop, I can have all kinds of computers connected at the same time.
Next question.
Next question comes in from Angelo Jack in Brooklyn, New York. Angelo asks, is a Mac Neo good enough computer for multi-track recording of the Yamaha DM3-D, or what is the best option?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I don't have firsthand experience with it, but from what I heard from BlackMagic, Grant Petty demonstrating the Fairlight audio app with a ton of tracks, I don't think that you're going to have that issue with the DM3. So the DM3, it's a 16 by 16 interface, and you can just use Dante Virtual Sound Card to pipe the audio in there to do multi-track recording with whatever digital audio workstation of your choice that you'd like to pick. So I don't think you're going to have an issue with 16 tracks on that system. Next question.
Next question comes in from Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham, Washington. Do you recognize this lavalier microphone? The size format seems odd. Too big to be a standard lavalier. Any advantage? And he has a link to a picture there.
Yeah, I was just pulling it up here. This is what it looks like, and that is extremely long and really awkward. I don't know what that is, and I honestly, it's a very peculiar choice. They decided to go with something like that. Normally, you would typically use like a discrete lav, something that's a sub-miniature capsule. And a lot of people, I would have probably picked a really small lav and probably hid it behind the tie of the talent. I don't know. Courtney, what do you think about this?
This picture looks like it came from C-SPAN. So the U.S. Senate and House have these little microphones on the podium because different senators get up and speak, and the representatives, and sometimes they don't want to lean over the podium. So this is mounted on a stick on the podium, and they can pick it up and then clip it to themselves. So it's big enough to either work as a stand mic or as a lavalier. And I don't know what brand it is, but you see it in all of those C-SPAN videos online. So I think that is the microphone that's pictured there, and I'm not sure if it's Audio Technica or somebody like that that makes it for that specific application to be able to use it on a stand or clip it to your a lapel as a lavalier so that you can have your hands free. You don't have to hold it, and you don't have to deal with leaning over or getting it in the way if you're using a lot of papers to read off of. So it's used for it's a lectern mic that works as a lavalier and clips on.
And in the chat too, John Wallace is saying Audio Technica capsule in servo reeler body, whatever that is. Okay, let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Brody Hefner in New York City. What are some use cases that justify upgrading from increasingly capable prosumer remote mics, like the popular Rode Go line, to the much more expensive pro models like Sony, Saramonic, or the new RODELink II that we saw at NAB?
Guy?
Well, all it takes is you getting burned and having your reputation on the line. I feel bad now after reviewing some of this NAB short footage that Opus came out with, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's horrible." So there was all this pulsing. There were so many frequencies going across in the show floor, and one of the unique things about some of these higher end ones, there's a lot of things you could crank them up, so you could go to like 100 milliwatt and just blow everybody out of the water. The other thing is you could use things like spectrum. You could auto scan on your receiver and figure out who's where, and then you could find the little dip where nobody is, and then you can adjust to that frequency. So some of these more expensive models have wideband where they can go all the way from 400 all the way up to 600. Some are just really stuck or at a fixed frequency. As far as things like battery life, you could swap out batteries. You could see the transmission strength. You could see the battery life. You could do things like remotely turn off the unit. You can't do that with a little DJI mic. So they're super popular, but all it takes is just getting burned, and then you start to look at what's the medium, and then what's the high end. And this is, again, where you might want to just look at hiring a professional sound person, because they have not only these tools, but they have the knowledge to be able to do a frequency scan and know where things are at. And then also maybe have a bow tie antenna, so that it's about the reception as well, because those antennas can reject certain frequencies. So if you're getting spray from 900 or something like that, but somehow it's leaking into yours, you could say, ignore all those other frequencies and just use these ones. So there's lots of little things, nuances, and then some of them also record. So if you in 32 bits, so if you do lose it, you still have that backup recording. Those are a few things that are on the higher end Wizzies and Axients, and I'm sure somebody in the chat like Mickey will probably correct me for whatever I'm missing.
Courtney.
Yeah, I mean, once you jump up to the Shure, Sony, Electrosonics, that UHF line of microphones, you get out of the 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz range. The 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz is unlicensed, so it's kind of a free-for-all, and both of those frequencies are used for Wi-Fi. They're used for Internet of Things, any of communications that are going to be in the 2.4. It's used for microwave ovens and microwave dishes. So, and remember, the higher the frequency, the shorter the distance it travels, and the less it penetrates through walls and things. So lower frequency, better; higher frequency, less better. So the 2.4 gigahertz, which is much higher than the UHF frequencies of 400 to 600 megahertz, the 2.4 gigahertz is a lot higher, and the 5 gigahertz is even higher. So it has less penetration, less distance. Also the more expensive microphones like the Sony and the Electrosonics are licensed, and you technically have to have a license to operate those in the UHF frequencies. So hopefully your sound mixer has a UHF license. And it also governs the manufacturers. The manufacturers don't have to get very strict clearance from the FCC every time they change the design of any of those microphones. The lower cost Rode Go lines, you're competing with a whole lot of other people in that spectrum. And like was said, signal to noise is very important in a wireless mic, especially a digital wireless mic, because in a digital wireless mic, once the noise level gets so high, your transmission just starts to break up. Packets get lost and don't get recovered, and you just end up with choppy motorboaty sound. Whereas in the old analog days, you used to have a graceful degradation. You'd have a little you'd hear some noise, or you'd hear a few hits here and there. But the sound wouldn't drop out completely. It'd still be intelligible enough to get your point across if it was important. These days with digital transmission, once the signal to noise gets up too high, it goes away completely, or it gets so intermittent that you can't make out what people are saying. So that's an important distinction between the digital wireless that is on the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz and the UHF analog and now the UHF digitals that are in that range.
Chris.
So I have a handful of Saramonic stuff, and I would recommend them for what they are, but they are not professional. Saramonic and RODELink, they're just not professional tools. And so just want to get that out there. Those are not professional. They're consumer. They can say pro on the side, but they're consumer products.
It works right up until it doesn't. Go ahead, Guy.
And the other thing, when you're using a professional sound mixer, they're going to have most likely a hop, or they're going to have a cable that can go back to a breakaway cable, so they can quickly disconnect from the camera operator. And the nice thing is that you have your files all discrete. Let's say there's 8 wireless. You can have 8 people mic'd up, and all those are discrete. So there's time code. There's other things that professionals know. So when you listen to the hop that I listen to at the Electrosonics, and you listen to the quality of their new S1 microphone with their new plug-on transmitter, you start to go, oh, this is why people love these things, because you can give a director or producer this sound that just is amazing. Like it sounds like they're there. I mean, it sounds like they're in the room, and you could be 100 feet away. So there's more to it than just what you think as far as ISO recording and being able to save audio. And that's the other thing with a real mixer, they're sitting there monitoring everything on the levels, and maybe if it's live, they're even using noise assist if they need to clean something up. So on a bunch of these videos that I just put in our Discord, I ran them through Adobe Podcast, and the difference is amazing, but it couldn't cure those wireless hits. Unfortunately, it wasn't that good. So that's the other pain of this whole process, is you screw it. Pardon, you mess up the audio. You're going to have to spend time in post fixing it. And now all of a sudden it's like, what was your real savings if you're spending hours? So I spent a couple hours yesterday downloading the files, uploading to Adobe Podcast, and pulling them back down. So now in post, you're just creating a nightmare. So when people say sound is expensive, it's 50% of your project. You're out there spending all this money on lenses and fancy cameras, spend 50% on sound.
All right, and just a reminder too, because we've got a lot of questions stacking up today, we might not be able to get to all of them. So right now, it is really critical that all of you vote on the questions that you want us to answer. Also, if you'd like to show your support for this show, if you like what you're watching or listening to right now, there are various ways that you can do that. You can become part of our community. This is entirely driven by a group of volunteers to produce this show every single week, and there are various roles available, whether you are interested in being a panel and sharing your knowledge to help people, or you want to be on the back end crew. If you're interested, go to officehours.global/join or /volunteer. I think those both go to the same place, and that is the best place to do that. And of course, you can also subscribe to the show on YouTube, and also donate by going to officehours.global/donate. That's officehours.global/donate. All right, what's up next?
Next one comes in from Dharamshala, India. Funsak Dorji asks, greetings. Used a rented vMix V29 PC to live stream a soccer tournament. Great experience. We now want to buy a PC for vMix. Will RTX NVIDIA 5070 be enough to do 4Cam replays in terms of GPU? Thanks.
Chris, about him.
So, as is often the case on office hours, it depends, right? On the face of it, yes. Like if you want to do 4 cameras replay, that GPU should be fine. If you also want to stream to 3 other destinations, send out a bunch of NDI, do multiple recordings, have a bunch of other graphics, all kinds, like maybe. And so this is kind of one of those things where like it's probably enough, but it depends on what else you're going to do with that vMix system and how elaborate your broadcast is as to whether or not it will be enough. It probably will be, but you got to test. You got to test to make sure.
Next question.
Next one comes in from Hasmukh Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa. Weekly setup production at the hospital. Slide computer is a MacBook Air. Production computer is a 16-inch MacBook M2 with an ATEM HDMI Extreme, 2 BlackMagic Pocket Cinema camera 6Ks, and a MIxPre 6.2 for sound. I would like to build a movable case or desk so that we can store it at the hospital and roll into the show auditorium easily.
You know, Ozma, there's lots of people on YouTube that have built this kind of stuff, so that may give you some inspiration, but I don't know what's available in the market in Cape Town, but I know here in Vancouver, there's a local company that manufactures all sorts of custom cases for production. So I would recommend looking and seeing who actually manufactures cases because you're probably going to want to have something custom made. Courtney, what do you think?
You can go with if you don't have a whole lot of rack mount stuff there. You have a couple of computers. You could put you've got laptops mostly, and the cameras. So there isn't a whole lot of stuff you would rack mount there. I was going to suggest like a Gator rack mount case that you sit on top of an AV cart that would have your monitors in it and perhaps a slide out tray for your laptop so that you can close the lid on the laptop, slide the tray in and close it up and put a lock on it so you can lock your equipment up in a storeroom when you're not using it. It's less tempting to have laptops out in the open is to lock them into a case when you're not using them. For years also, I built fly pack cases that would then sit on top of Magliner carts and just take them and you take the lids off, put them on top and put a monitor on top of them and you're ready to go. Everything is pre-wired together, and that's another important thing is if you build that laptop and you dedicate those two laptops into that case, everything is pre-wired so that you're not plugging and unplugging all those little USB-C connectors all the time. That's going to save you from damaging your laptops if you keep everything plugged in all the time and just slide it out on a tray and open it up and you're ready to go. It also improves your startup time. If everything is pre-wired, all your wall warts are in a power management strip where you can just turn on one strip and everything powers up. That's also handy to have. And I've used something as cheap as the Cosco, C-O-S-C-O type of carts that I've modified a little bit so that they open up and wheel around with a shelf on them. So that's one way to go, or Magliner is a more expensive way to go. But I would build a case that you can close and lock up to put those laptops in, and then a separate case that would maybe go on a bottom shelf where you store your cameras in, and a place to hang tripods on the side. There are a lot of accessories that the cart manufacturers make for hanging tripods for cameras. So you could hang 2 or 3 tripods on the side. So you wheel the case in, you set up the tripods, and you run the cables out to the cameras. And also cable hooks. Have all your cables neatly arranged in hooks on the cart itself so that you don't have to get them out and deal with putting them into a case where they all mix together and get all tangled up. If you have them all hanging separately, you can run them out to the cameras.
All right, next question.
Next one comes in from James Fossil in Indianapolis, Minnesota. Or Minneapolis, sorry. Minneapolis, Minnesota. I found the focus on Courtney Goodin. Who is that? Last Tuesday's show, fascinating. And many on the panel today. How do you lean into the new and creating the new? Is this drive, intelligence, passion? Who knows?
Probably all of the above, but I just will say it for me, and I'll be brief. The intelligence thing, I think intelligence is overrated. I think that's kind of like a byproduct. I think a lot of it is just it's the curiosity for me that really pushes me to learn new things because I am deathly afraid of being left behind in anything that I do. And I think that's why I'm always trying to push the edge, find out like, what is available? How can I use it? How can I make my life better? Let's start with Courtney.
Well, I've always been interested in how things work. I used to take stuff apart, and I used to always be interested in finding out stuff and learning stuff. And I always self-motivated. I taught myself how to program, and it used to be a lot harder than it is today. These days, you guys got it easy. I used to have to go to the library and find a publication that was in a magazine, EDN magazine from
What about them punch cards?
1968. Yeah. And I have to look up an article in the card, in the card catalog. I had to go through those little cards, looking it up, then find it in the periodicals and go back to, let's see, 1968.
That's microfiche.
Yeah, or pull out the microfiche, exactly, and put it on the thing in the microfilm. These days, you just type a question into the AI bot on your browser, and away you go. You have the world's information at your fingertips, And it's so much easier now for the people that are driven by the goal of gaining intelligence and educating yourself and learning about stuff. And that's what I love about today. And it's so much easier today than it used to be.
Craig.
Yeah, you said it after I clicked the button. Curiosity is really what at least drives me. Growing up, I ruined a lot of clock radios and toasters and anything electronic at our house because I needed to find out how does this thing work, and that curiosity drives a lot. When I'm interviewing new potential employees, curiosity is the one thing I'm looking for because that drives so much in the face of everything, especially when they're challenged with stuff like AI, where even what's changing is changing. The whole context and how we approach things is constantly challenged by that. And so it's the needing that curiosity. How is this going to work? You're leaning into it just by its very nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was a great Saturday. That'll wrap it for today. Thank you to all the panelists for bringing your vast different experiences and contributing to the show and answering these questions thoroughly. And of course, to you, the producers who put in these questions, you drive the show, as we always like to say. And the show is always as long as you make it. So we appreciate you. You came through for us. And of course, to the back end crew that puts on the show, that shows up every single week to put on all these shows and to make sure everything's prepped and looks and sounds great, all the various roles involved. Too many to count, so thank you very much for the work that you do. And if we didn't answer your question today, we had a lot stacking up. We would have pushed those questions back. You don't need to do anything, but you can repost those questions on another day. And tomorrow is always going to be another show on Sunday, one of my favorite days. And if we were to travel around the world to answer all these questions according to the Tilak Traversal, that would have been 51,000 miles. That's 82,000 kilometers, 405 million bananas for scale. This was episode 2223. We'll see you in After Hours. Bye.
Yes, my curiosity was piqued as a child of 2 when I stuck my finger in a light bulb socket to see if it would light up. Found very quickly that it would not.
Shocking.
Yes, it was shocking. Shocking discovery.
I remember the first time I took apart the family computer when I was really young, and I just had a pile of bolts left that I didn't know where they went. My dad was not a happy camper. It's one thing to take apart, but it's the reassembly that's the important part.
I put it together with fewer parts.
Yeah, Dad, I optimized. Look at all these
That's
parts.
what Earl Muntz. That's what
It
Earl
still
Muntz
works.
used
It still
to make
boots.
to manufacture his TV. Earl Muntz would buy an Admiral TV, and he'd start pulling out tubes and circuits until it stopped working, and then he manufactured that TV without those parts.
All right, great show, everyone.
Thank you all.
See you around.
Bye.
Adios.